Boston, who is at the University of Minnesota, which is located in Minneapolis instead of Oxford, Ohio. My distinction. Dr. Boston.
Purpose I'm bringing this to the foreground. I was coming back from the place we were entertained last night with three of our friends from Winston-Salem. They wanted to know what I had in this package, and I said, "This is my speech." And they said, well, they didn't have to leave town until 8 o'clock tomorrow night. So I said, this will be a marathon. Who can stay longest, the speaker or the people that listen? It's not that bad now, I can assure you. What I have done is to mimeograph the material. As a matter of fact, thought you might be interested in. Guess I've got plenty here. I'm actually presenting the summary. The material I presented at the National Association of Secondary School Principals in Philadelphia, early part of February. And if you want to check this further, you'll find essentially this material in the April issue of the Bulletin of the National Association of Secondary School Principals. Now, it seems that they persistently want to keep me tied up with Ohio. This last report that I referred to is actually from Iowa. The data came too late to incorporate it in this report. I waited till the very last minute to have it mimeographed to see if this material would come, because at the Cincinnati meeting I heard that Iowa was making such a study. I immediately wrote to the person whose name I was given, but they were very slow sending back a report, and partly I found because they were just finishing the summary of the material and only sent me an advance report of part of the material. Unfortunately, it is not cast in the framework in which much of the data that I am going to report, so that I cannot give you much from it. But I'll have to take time later to incorporate. It just came the last of the week. First couple of paragraphs, of course, are a way of introduction, which I would say that, again, very happy indeed to be here. I've always looked forward to the opportunity of coming to visit the famous Borough School and what they were doing in the core program here. And since the inauguration of the State Core Conference in Indiana, I've always looked forward to the possibility of visiting this conference sometime. Well, last year, when the National Conference and Core Teachers to be here, I'd looked forward to the possibility of attending. Then I discovered that they wanted me down in Chile for a year, so I was away when this conference was in session. So, jokingly, I suggested at the ASCD meeting to Dr. Hoops that to give me an excuse for coming, I might come. She told me to come on, so this is my excuse for being here. I very seldom write a speech. As a matter of fact, I wrote this one because they wanted to put it into the bulletin. And I always hesitate to read. But inasmuch as it does deal with a mass of data, I will try to present it in reading form, and you can take it back to your homes and read it in more detail. I am very happy to report in the overall that the data that has been developing in the last 10 years in the field of the core curriculum, or what we now call, in an attempt to clarify the issues between so-called block time, which is not core, but which many identify as core. We speak of block time classes and the core. They're quite two different things. The low core takes on the trappings of block time as a part of its ability to function better under those broader patterns of time. May I begin then by starting my reading, if you can follow along with it. Within the past 8 years, 3 types of studies involving the status of block time classes in secondary schools have been made. There are the studies of national and state scope concerned with the entire secondary school period. Second, studies directly only at the secondary or at the senior high school level. And third, studies limited to the junior high school years. And may I interpose by saying I'm a little disturbed at times in this conference thus far this today to hear people talking as though, maybe they did not mean it as such, that the Corps was limited to the junior high school. There are a good many people that have that idea. But the Corps basically began in its thinking in terms of the senior high school. If you'll go back to the Educational Policies Commission, Education for All American Youth, published in 1944 and revised in 1952, you'll find one paragraph that says that the course program begins at the 10th grade and runs through the 14th. That actually the most radical recommendations you'll find for the junior high school is made in that report of this responsible group, when they say we should have a uniform program for all children from the 7th to the 9th grade inclusive, and differentiation to take care of individual interests and so forth should be taken care of within the block time situation and the core program itself, which is a very radical recommendation, and means that in terms of the National Commission, core actually begins in the senior high school. But we will find that its most rapid development has been in the junior high school, and that's partly because of the college entrance requirements that become a bugaboo for so many people in the senior high school. Think about it. But I wanted to interpose that comment. Wright has reported 6 such important studies of the junior high schools of recent date. I'm referring to our 1958 study in the Office of Education. The most comprehensive studies of block time classes in the core curriculum at the beginning of this decade, 1949 to 50 and 52, reported by Wright of the Office of Education. Her parallel study, restricted to the junior high school period, reported in 1958, provides the most comprehensive recent survey of block time classes in grades 7 to 9. We have, therefore, a basis for a comparative study of the development of block time class practices over approximately an 8-year period. It is not possible to make exact comparisons between the several studies that will be referred to in this report, inasmuch as the terminology used in these studies were not identical. As a result, some studies include schools undoubtedly omitted in others. Wright calls attention to a further serious limitation to her recent study, because though it purports to be a study of current conditions in the junior high school, the mailing lists for the study were confined to junior and senior high schools in existence in 1951 and 52, and ignores block time developments in junior high schools organized since that date. And you remember that in our core commission, she was quite disturbed that the more recent studies show a larger development of the core program than her 1958 findings show. I think the answer is to be found in the fact that she has not taken into account the development of junior high school since 51-52. And in my knowledge of junior high school development since that time, and I've had since making this report at the National Association of Secondary School Principals, comments from various schools saying that our major development in the core program has been since 1951-52. And as in this conference I discovered that the new junior high schools that are being developed in terms of some aspects of the core project. Take my own sister city of St. Paul. The junior high schools that they are now developing as a part of their system began in about 1954. And those high schools, junior high schools, are all developing a high level of core work. So I think that some of the data that we will show, which indicates a higher ratio of core work than Grace Wright shows, is due to the very limitations she calls attention to in her study. It is precisely during these latter years of the greatest development of the organization of the junior high school unit has taken place, as most naturally in the creation of these new units that more advanced forms of curriculum organization have found favor. Although the speaker's general acquaintance with newly reorganized secondary schools since 1951-52 is limited, he is not aware of a single junior high school created since 1951-52 that has not included block time classes in its reorganizational plan, as well as more advanced curriculum practices. Not all of them have been core. It is the speaker's belief that this is the principal reason for Wright's observation that all but one of the recent studies made show a larger percent of block time class practices in the junior high school than she found in her study reported in 1958. In 1949, Wright found that for the separately organized junior high school, the national findings show a ratio of 15 8/10% used block time classes compared with 31 and 4% and 4/10% for her 1956-57 study reported in 1958. Stated in another way, the ratio of use of block time classes has doubled in the 8-year period from 1949 to 1957, or 58 as is reported. A study made in 1956 by the National Association of Secondary School Principals of block time practices in a sampling of 1,170 junior high schools reporting revealed 57 and 3/10% used block time classes. An earlier study made by Byers in 1953 of 130 junior high schools showed pupils remaining with one teacher for more than one period as follows: grade 7, 49%, grade 8, 35%, and for grade 9, 18%. In a study made in 1954 of 251 junior high schools, Lonsbury found that 59% of the schools had block time classes bringing together 2 or more subjects under the same teacher. Douglas and Gruen, in a similar study made of 370 junior high schools and reported in 1956, found that 40% of these schools combined English and social studies, and 20% combined other subjects in one class. Since in their report the table used indicates 40% of the schools studied did not use any form of integrated courses in a block time of 2 or more periods, the inference is that 60% of the junior high schools in this study employed block time classes. A study made by McEachin of a selected group of 150 junior high schools, and therefore not quite comparable to the random sampling followed by the previous studies, indicated that approximately 2/3 of the schools used the block time organization at the 7th grade level, 41% at the 8th grade level, and 22% at the 9th grade level. In addition to these studies, made at the regional or national level, several studies have been made of block time classes at the state level. An earlier study of this type in California was made by Normington, who found that 90% of the junior high schools of his sampling reported the use of block time classes. Block time classes were most prevalent in the 7th grade, less so in the 8th grade, and least popular in the 9th grade. A study made of all secondary schools in Minnesota, made by Bossing and Kaufman in 1955, to discover the prevalence of and the quality of block time or core class or core programs, that was made to discover the prevalence of the quality of block time or core programs. It was found that 32 and 9/10% of the junior high schools used block time classes. Now this was, I should say, part of an inauguration plan that we have set up by the National Commission, of course, that we shall get complete studies of all secondary schools within the several states. Many of them have been sampling. We have some question about the reliability of sampling per se. And we are trying, through the sponsorship of the National Core Commission, to sponsor a series of studies in every state in the Union, which will give us complete data on every high school, or as near complete as we can possibly get in the survey process, of every secondary school in the state. And that's what we were starting out to do in Minnesota. So when we report these studies, we are reporting every secondary school approximately in the state, or near that percentage as we can get. It is found that 32 and 9/10% of the junior high schools use block time classes, closely approximating the national average of 31 9/10% by Wright. In a recent study made in 1957 of block time classes in Alabama, Holloway found 21.9% of junior high schools used block time classes. Growth in block time classes other than separate junior high schools. Broader studies of block time class practices in the secondary school and the senior high school are fewer in number. Popular thinking associates block time classes or core practices with the junior high school, despite the growing usage of multiple period classes in both senior high schools and colleges. The only elaborate study at the national level covering the entire secondary school was made by Wright in 1949, previously mentioned. In this study, she found that 4 and 9/10% of all secondary schools used the block time type of class organization, while 6 and 4/10% of such classes were found in junior, senior type schools, 1 and 4/10% in regular four-year high schools, and 3 and 5/10% in separate senior high schools. Bossing in 1956 made a more limited national study using a random sampling of 1,000 senior high schools, regular four-year high schools, and combined junior senior high schools. A comparison of the Wright and Bossing studies revealed block time classes to be respectively separate senior high schools 3 and 5/10 and 6 and 6/10%, or approximately a doubling of block time class practice in a 6-year period. 1 and 4/10% against 5 and 8/10% in the regular four-year high school, and 6 and 4/10 contrasted with 9 and 3/10% in the undivided junior senior high school. Bossing study showed a substantial growth of block time class practices at all upper year levels of the secondary school. 3 recent studies of block time practices of a statewide nature covering all secondary schools within these states provide a suggested basis of comparison with the national studies reported above. Otto Holloway in 1957 completed a study of Alabama secondary school practices. He found that 14 and 9/10% of all schools reporting used block time classes. Block time classes were used in 13 and 4/10% of combined junior senior high schools and in 8.3% of separate senior high schools. Bossing and Kaufman made a similar study of block time class practice in 1957 of all Minnesota secondary schools. From a 97% questionnaire return, 14 and 4/10% of all schools reported the use of block time classes, with 11 and 1/10% of combined junior senior high schools, 15% of four-year high schools, and 9 and 3/10% of senior high schools employing block time classes. Clute reported a partially complete analysis of a statewide study made of the secondary schools of Michigan. He found 42% of all secondary school districts reported schools using block time classes. And of all secondary schools reporting the use of block time classes, 46% were junior high schools and 54% represented all other types of secondary schools. Rather interestingly, that his study shows more schools other than the junior high schools using block time class organization in Michigan. Note, however, that the statistics is not quite comparable here with the statistics I have been giving, because in the reports which he made to me, partial report of their study, not yet fully worked out, he was dealing with just those schools that had reported the use of block time classes, so it looks larger here. But the proportions what I'm concerned about, that they found of junior high versus the upper levels of the secondary school. From this data, it is clear that percentage-wise increase in the use of block time programs in the upper years of the secondary schools has increased rapidly within the past 8 years. Likewise, percentage-wise, the rate of increase of block time practices in the upper years of the secondary school corresponds favorably with the rate of growth at the junior high school level. With the exception of Bossing's study of senior high school practices in 1956, where it was found that there were 25% more block time or core classes in the 10th grade than at the 9th grade, and slightly more schools with such classes in grade 12 than in grade 9, all studies tend to show the greatest use of block time class organization at the 7th grade level and decreasing progressively as the 12th grade is reached. I don't know how to explain my findings in the situation in variance with the other, but there are the facts. Another aspect of block time practices is the general agreement of all studies that block time or core classes are more extensively used in the larger schools. Wright found general agreement between a 1949 study of all secondary school levels and a 1957 study of junior high school practices. In 1949, she found that 71 and 2/10% of all block time schools reporting had enrollments of over 500 pupils. In 1956-57, 78 and 4/10% of block time junior high school classes were in schools with enrollment of 500 or above. Bossing's study in 56 found 59% of the block time classes were in schools with enrollments of over 500. The National Association of Secondary School Principals study in 1956 found 72 and 5/10% of junior high schools of over 1,000 enrollment using block time classes against 56% of all junior high schools included in the study employing block time classes. Development of core in the block time classes. While the growth of block time class practices is an important index of progress in curriculum and general educational development, it is of still greater significance to discover what changes are taking place instructionally and curriculum-wise in this extended class period. Wright, in her 1949 study, found that 91 and 9/10% of so-called core courses represented combinations of English and social studies, or these with other subjects in combination with some correlation attempted. And of the 8 and 1/10% remaining, fusion and still smaller percent of problem-centered classes was found. In 1957 junior high school study, Wright found 68% of the block time classes reported teaching the 2 or more subjects involved separately or with some form of correlation attempted. Approximately 84% of these schools attempted some correlation of the subjects included in the block time classes. Another 20% of the schools using block time classes have moved to the fusion stage with the unit method of instruction as the instrument of fusing subjects. Another 12% have moved to the experience problem-centered type instruction in which the content is focused on the problems of personal and social need of pupils in our democratic society. This latter figure approaches the concept of good core class practice as held by advocates of the core curriculum. The 1956 study by Bossing found that 50% of the secondary schools reporting block time classes indicated the use of some form of unified study organization, and 63 and 6/10% reported courses organized around some form of personal social problems approach. Obviously, some schools reported the use of both unified studies and personal social problems approach. Holloway, in his 1957 study, found that 69 and 2/10% of block time classes used none or some correlation between subjects, while 30 and 8/10% used some form of fusion or personal social problems type of content organization within the class. The 1957 Minnesota study found 32% of the schools used separate subjects with a majority employing some degree of correlation. 12% indicated subjects were unified or fused around a central theme or problem stemming from one or more subjects in the block class. Another 30% used a combination of correlation and fusion. 24% reported the use of the combination above with problems arising from the personal social needs of youth, and only 2% used exclusively the accepted core class procedure of using problems arising from the personal social needs of youth. I have to admit that Minnesota's not moving up in terms of the rigid concept of core which some of us are advocating. However, when principals were asked the program plan for the 1957-58 program, 54% indicated they planned to move to a class procedure based upon problems arising from societal or the personal social needs of youth, which indicates a very radical intent, at least, to move from where they were to something better. The 1956 Michigan study, entitled Obstacles and Facilitating Factors in Block Time Teaching by Genevieve Moyer, divided the range of class type organization for instructional purposes into 4 categories along a continuum from teaching subjects in isolation to the complete organization of the class content around problems of personal and social concern of students arrived at by teacher and pupil decision. The 2 categories which conform most nearly to traditional practices employed by 76 and 9/10% of the teachers reporting, and 23 and 1/10% used the 2 categories utilizing the personal social problems of youth, either largely determined by the teacher in advance or by the pupils and the teacher together. From these studies, it is clear that slowly but surely there is a definite trend toward the use of more educationally accepted forms of teacher-pupil derived curriculum content for block time classes. Another significant development found in the more recent studies of block time and core type classes is the mounting recognition of the advantages this type of organization provides for the operation of the teacher guidance function. The 1956-57 study of Wright indicates that many school administrators think the principal advantage of a block time class is the opportunity such class provides for guidance activities. Teachers, they say, can know pupils better than the many that they have to handle in the single class period type organization, and that block time classes make possible more intimate pupil-teacher relationship, which encourages natural guidance counseling activities. In conclusion, it seems clear from the foregoing research studies covering the past 8 years that block time class programs are gaining rapidly in popularity, that this growth in popularity is most marked at the junior high school level, but is steadily gaining in popularity at the senior high school level, that there is a slow but marked shift away from the traditional subject-centered organization of the curriculum in the direction of the problem-centered organization of the curriculum around the large societal and personal social needs of youth, that there is a growing recognition of the advantages of block time class organization for teacher guidance activities, that block time classes provide for greater flexibility in all aspects of the teaching functions, such as caring for individual differences, wider range of use of classroom methods, teaching materials, including greater use of library and community resources, and finally, that there is every evidence that block time programs will become the dominant pattern of class organization in the future.